All right, are we all back here? All right, nobody fell asleep, got stuck in front of the TV, binge watching your favorite show. All right, so before we move on to anything else, please, questions, comments. I mean, basically, you should consider yourself successful if you feel like you've now got the ability to select a piece of content and get it out into a slide, and then maybe do some customizing of that in terms of where it goes, how big it is, how it's rotated, some of the other options in terms of color or direction it's facing. Yes, Tom. Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I understand that. That particular issue is not one that I've run into, but I don't doubt that that happens. I don't know if it's a difference between. I don't know if it's web connection. I mean, a mouse pointer going away to me sounds like software interaction as opposed to any sort of a network issue. Um, but yeah, I so it looks like a couple of you did have that issue of the mouse disappearing. Um, oh yeah, still, yeah. I know the one thing that I ran into when I was doing the video at the beginning is, if you've got things on top of each other, I discovered that sometimes when I was trying to click on the gear to do the settings for a particular item, that it was actually selecting an item that was underneath that. I did find if you double click on an item that it does the same thing and it brings the menu up. So that was a workaround for that. But okay, well, yeah, I'll take that down as an issue too, and see if I can do some research on that. I'm assuming that is everyone using Chrome, or those of you that had that issue, are you on Chrome? Oh, on Safari. Okay. Yeah, I wonder. Okay, that may be. I know. I mean, I use Safari for just about everything, and I always have. Um, but I do know that certain things, a lot of these companies now that are making these web apps, um, are are basically saying you've got to use Chrome in order for this to work because there are certain features, um, that just don't or that aren't compatible with certain browsers. I hadn't seen anything particularly related to Powtoon on that, but that potentially could be an issue. I even know this is what's interesting. My school's a Microsoft school now, and so we're using the whole Microsoft suite and all the Microsoft Online and Microsoft Teams, and they actually are telling us to use Chrome. So Microsoft, who has their own browser, is telling us to use Chrome with their apps because that's the only browser that their apps actually are fully functional in. Which to me just seems odd that of all companies, Microsoft is telling us to use another company's browser instead of their own. So that possibly could have been that particular issue. And I don't know, maybe that might have also related to some of the other issues as well with the original content. So that might be something to check out, and maybe I'll do some testing in Safari and see if I can find anything else out. And any other issues, questions? Somebody mentioned something about having difficulty getting text to. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, to get so with the text, and I don't know if this is the issue, so let me throw something text in here. Um, so if I'm grabbing one of these text bubble, thought bubble things, to edit the text itself, you do need to double click on it to make it selectable. I don't know if that was the issue. Um, if you're just clicking on it once, it'll grab the box, but not allow you to change the text. So it does take a double click, and what it'll do is select the whole text that's in there when you double click. So when you start typing, it'll replace what's there with what you're typing. If you click once it's highlighted, if you click one more time, that'll give you the cursor that you can move around inside the text if you have to edit. So yeah, that's the only any of the other items. If you double click on them, like I said, that'll shortcut you right to the settings menu for that item. With text, when you double click on it, that's what makes the text editable. Okay. Anything else? Yes, go ahead. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yes, no. And this is I actually this was I was fighting with this earlier as well. And I started trying to do some looking online to see if because this obviously this isn't the only we're not the only ones having this issue. What I found is and I couldn't consistently because it doesn't happen for everything all the time, but it does that does seem to be a glitch that um, when you've got items that appear or move later on in a slide when you're previewing it. Now, when I move the black triangle, they show up. When I let go of the black triangle, they're not there. But you're right. When I hit the preview, they're there, and then things move into place. So that is an issue, and I'm actually going to follow up on that one because I found that one myself. What I did find is when I finally did the actual export of the project as an actual video, everything looked fine. So I'm not sure what's causing those things to bunch up in the corner like that. But yes, I did find that out when I was working on mine earlier, and that is something I'm already trying to follow up with Powtoon and trying to find out why that happens. So it is not part of the final export, but having it show up while you're trying to build is annoying. So I am looking at that. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So if I find out anything about that, like I said, I am trying to get in touch with Powtoon directly and just trying to do some searching to see if other people are having that issue and what's causing it. If I find out anything, I will definitely let you folks know. The question on the watermark, Yeah, that's unfortunately that is the one thing. Even though I'm pro plus, because it is an educational account, they do watermark it with that Powtoon for EDU at the bottom. I think that has to do with maybe with licensing or something, that if you're going to be using this material royalty free. I don't know. I'm not sure, or they just want to have their logo on there, which is. Uh, oh, that's interesting. Did you have Tanya? Did you have your own account from previously, or was this a new account for this? Okay, so maybe if you came in an account that was not an educational account, then maybe it's not there. I mean, I know if you're on one of their standard, just commercial accounts, that watermark doesn't appear. So okay, so what I think I'd like to do, just looking at time, and doing this kind of instruction online always takes longer than it does when we're in person. The I think what I'd like to do is kind of get through Powtoon tonight, since we're in that mode and we're thinking about it and we're on that. So the CCCC, the four C's framework, I'm going to just take off the table for the class tonight, and I will probably incorporate that material into part of what you would be working on next week, when we are offline for next week's class. So, and I'll make the adjustments on the what am I trying to say, on the homework section of the Moodle, because there was an assignment that was related to the 4C framework. So I'll take that off the table and, like I said, just convert it. So I think I'd just like to keep going, because honestly, in terms of the functionality of all this, there's really only a few more items. They tend to be the items that maybe take a little more tweaking, so they might take some more time, but there's not a lot of it. So I think we can get through it, get a little bit of practice time in, and still have some time to answer some final questions and get the homework in before our time is up. So if what we looked at so far is what I call what the stuff is, so now we've dragged a bunch of stuff out there and moved it around. The other half of this application is making the things that you've put in there do stuff, to move around. And there's really just three aspects to it that show up depending on what the item is. There's what they call animation, there is effects, and there is what they call A to B. So I'm going to look at those three things and do a little tweaking of the scene that I have up on the screen, and kind of go through what that is. So before we get to those three things, the items on the screen where we're going to be paying attention now are primarily at the bottom of the screen. And I know a bunch of you have already been looking down there and sort of seeing what's going on. But for each slide has its own timeline. The timeline is in seconds. Each second is divided into halves of a second. So everything that happens in a slide is going to happen in multiples of a second, or start halfway through a second. You can't sort of fine tune things beyond that. So the timeline represents the length that the slide will appear in your final project. If you want to change the length of the slide, at the far right-hand side of the timeline, there's a plus and a minus. That will add seconds in and remove seconds. The black triangle is the playhead. That is where you are. One thing to be aware of that I discovered is that when you add and remove seconds, it does it from where the playhead is located. So if you've built a scene and the scene is too long and your playhead is at the 5th second and you hit minus, then what it's going to do is remove that 5th second and squeeze the stuff that was on either side in. So it may change your timings or the organization of the slide. So if all you're interested in doing is shortening or lengthening the slide, just make sure that your playhead is at the end of the timeline before you hit the plus or the minus. You can also, if you want to remove from somewhere else in the slide, you can do that just by putting the playhead where you want it to go. But that's something that I discovered and can be frustrating if you don't have that playhead in the right location. Oh, yeah, there you go, Melissa. Yep. So getting frustrated is okay. Getting stuck, we keep working. All right. So these are really our 3 items. And then you will also notice that underneath the timeline, each object that you've put into the timeline, with the exception of your background, it sort of shows up in a little handle. And that's going to be part of how we adjust the way that they work in the timeline. But when you select an item, that item's handle will get selected. And then you'll notice that on the timeline itself, a portion of the timeline will turn blue. And that blue represents when that object will appear on the timeline. So at the very basic level, if you want things to appear and disappear, moving the edges of their zones around on the timeline will do that. So if I want my Pac-Man to appear at the beginning, I will drag its handle all the way to the beginning. And if I want it to disappear before the end, I will move that back as well. So now Pac-Man is there, and then Pac-Man disappears. All right, and so for everything that you've put in the timeline, you have that option of adjusting where that object happens during that slide. Okay, does that make sense? So if you just want to have objects come and go away, that's where you do it, is by selecting the item, or you can click directly on its handle. It'll select the item in the slide, and then you can make adjustments. Okay. The next thing you're able to do in the timeline is what they call effects. And really, the effect is not so much, we hear the word effect, I think people think, sparkles and fuzz filters and things like that. In terms of Powtoon, the effect is really just how the object appears and how the object disappears. So there is an enter effect and there is an exit effect for each object. You can edit those in the timeline by clicking on where it says the right effect. It'll pull up the menu. You've got a few options there. If you don't want any effect at all and you want it just to appear suddenly, you can do that. Or you can have it come in from the right. You can have it come in from the left. You can go up, you can go down. It can pop into place, or it can fade into place. So you can choose that for how it comes in. And then you do the same thing for how it goes out. You can go to the effect. You've got the same options in terms of right, left, up, down, pop, and fade. You also have the option of adding a hand, which in this particular case, I don't think would make much sense to have a big hand come out and grab this gentleman and take him away. But that is an option as well. Right now, there's only a woman's hand as an option. They seem to have other hands that are coming, but that's an option too. So that's at the bottom of the effect for the exit. Okay, so and you can do that on the enter as well. The other way to get to this same menu is if you're on the object when you're in here and you go to effects. And that'll bring up the exact same menu, enter effect, exit effect, hands, types of things. Okay. So we can make objects appear and disappear during the timeline. And now we can control how they appear and how they disappear. All right, questions? All right. The next is animation. And animation actually is not done in the timeline. Animation is about the object itself. Certain objects are animated and others are not. And you'll know because when you go to the settings menu, the animation option will either be available or not. All of the characters are animated. Some of the props are animated. Some of the shapes are animated. Some of the other things are animated. When you select the animation option, this is basically just about how you want the animation to show up. You can say no animation. If you really don't want the person sitting there waving, you can tell it don't animate this object at all. You can tell it to loop the animation a certain number of times. So maybe you want them to wave once and then stop. You can set that number down to 1 or however many times you want. If you just want it to play continuously, you select play in loop. And then for the whole length of the slide, for as long as that object is on the screen, it will do whatever its little animation is. You really don't have any control beyond that in terms of the animations. You can't change what it is that the animation does. All you can do is turn it on and off or tell it to do it a certain number of times and then stop. Okay, so that's our next form of movement. So they can appear, they can disappear, and we can control how they move. The final one, really the last thing, is A to B. And this is when you want an object that you've put on the screen to move on the screen or to change in some way, to transform. So for example, my friend over here, the Pac-Man. Maybe what I want to do is have the Pac-Man move across the screen from right to left. Now, he can slide into place using an enter, but it'll just come into this point and stop. So if I want it to move, actually move across the screen, that's what A to B means. You're going to set where the thing is at A point, then set where it is at the B, tell it how long to move it takes to move between the two, and then that's the movement it will follow. So if I take my Pac-Man, go to the settings and turn on A to B, now what happens is you've got two of them on the screen. One of them is the A position and one is the B position. It'll start by selecting the B position. If you want to change the A, this button here will switch between which one is being selected. All right. So if I want him to move across the screen, I'll grab the B. Ooh, I've got the A. I'll grab the B, and I will move the B across the screen. I can even have it move off the screen. So this is where it'll start, and this is where it'll end. Down in the timeline, you'll notice that a section of the timeline for this object is turned dark blue. That marks where it will move. So it doesn't have to move the whole time it's on the screen. It can move quickly and then stop. What you can't do is have it start still and then start to move. The motion will always start right from the beginning of when the object appears. But what you can do is grab the dividing line between the dark blue and the light blue and change how long it will take for that thing to move. So if I want the Pac-Man to start at the very beginning of the slide and then spend the entire slide moving its way across the screen, I can have it do so. So now when I preview the slide, Pac-Man moves across the screen until he disappears off the other side. And I know that it looks a little jumpy from your end because it's going over the WebEx, but at my end, as I'm looking at it, the movement is very smooth as it moves across the screen. Okay. Now, it doesn't have to be just movement. It can be movement, it can be size, and it can be the rotation or a combination of all of those. So maybe as Pac-Man moves, I also want Pac-Man to get bigger. And maybe I want Pac-Man to do a handstand or something. So by changing all of those, now when Pac-Man moves across the screen, it's going to slowly rotate and it's going to get bigger until it moves off the screen. All right. So questions on any of those three things? I mean, those are basically your options for movement. An object can appear and disappear based on where in the timeline it starts and ends. You can add an effect for how it gets into the scene and how it exits the scene. You can change its animation loop if it has an animation loop built into it. And then you can also create a movement animation using A to B, which will allow you to set where it starts, where it ends, and then the program will figure out how to move it from beginning to end as it goes. So, questions? And yes, if you hear a dog barking in the background, that is our puppy. No questions. Or everyone's asleep. Can the A to B? Yes, the A to B is really just about wherever you put the thing where it starts and wherever you put the thing when it ends. So you really get to decide. Now, it's always going to be a straight line. In more sophisticated animation programs, you can create paths that that something will follow. For this program, it basically will simply follow a straight line from wherever you start to wherever you finish. Now, it doesn't have to move. If you just want something to get bigger, just leave it in one spot and just change the size of it. Or if you want something to rotate in location, you can just rotate the B, leave it in the same location. But yes, it will always be a straight line if it's moving. If you wanted it to do more complicated movements, then you'd kind of have to do a variation of what we did earlier with the text, where you actually had multiple versions. One would enter the scene and move from point A to point B, then it would disappear but be replaced by another version that would then move from point B to point C. So you can get more complicated movements, but it requires putting in multiple instances. All right. Any other questions? One thing I wanted to point out, I actually did get a question during the break about the arrangement button in terms of sort of how that works. So right now, for example, you'll notice when I move the Pac-Man over my character, that the Pac-Man is behind the character. So even though they all look like they're on one flat surface, the way these programs usually work is that everything is in layers. So you imagine that each of these is a slip of paper and that those papers have to stack somehow if they're in the same space. So if instead I wanted the Pac-Man to be on top of him, to be eating him, that would be arranging. And in this case, I would bring it all the way to the front. And what that'll do is make this the top of the stack. So anything else that was on the screen, this would go on top of. If I wanted something to be on top of this, then I would move that on top. So you have to just kind of think about where the things are stacked. If you've got something that's in front of something else or something that's behind something else, that's what that does. If you use the other options, the forward and backward, those will just move that object one layer at a time. So if you don't want to move it all the way to the back or all the way to the front, you can move it one layer at a time to get it where you want it to go. All right. Yes, is this somebody had a question? Steve. Yeah, please do. No, you're welcome. Yeah, I with this I really feel like separate. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the screen, and if you just kind of separate it in your mind as to these are the things and these are how they move, that's useful. Oh, and actually, you're mentioning the timeline did make me remember one other thing. This the dreaded black triangle, which I said earlier will affect where seconds get added and removed. It also, if you when you add a new object to your slide, wherever the black triangle is located, that is where that object will go in terms of when it appears. So if I come over here and add a prop in, let me just grab something real quick here. I'll put in a hand. So I added this hand. The black triangle was at the second, so that's when it added that object onto the timeline. Initially, I usually just drag everything out there that belongs, and I don't really worry about timing initially. But once something's there, all you have to do is grab the handle for that object, and you can change where that object appears pretty quickly, or grab the black line at the edge of it. So that's the other function. So the black triangle really serves a bunch of different functions. It's where you are. It tells it where to paste new objects in. It tells you where you want to remove seconds or add seconds in. So just that's probably the biggest frustration I ran into, was losing track of that black triangle and having things appear in weird locations. But you can always change it. Had other objects pile on top of each other because of the triangle being. Yeah, well, and what the program will do, if there are multiple objects that all appear at the same time, so I just dragged everything so it all appears at once, you'll notice that the handle turns into a number 4, and all 4 of those become a little submenu. So you could actually move all 4 of those objects at once. Or if you wanted to just select one of them, it does give you the ability to just choose one, and then you can move just that single one. But yeah, if that triangle is where another object already came in, then they will pile on top of each other in the timeline. But you do have the ability to choose which one you want to work on. All right. Anything else at this point? All right. So, hopefully this has been useful. Like I said, my preference would have been to be able to be there in the room with you and kind of be able to look over your shoulder as we go through this. Oh, yes. Go ahead, Jimmy. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously I'm not a lawyer. Um, Obviously there are limits to how you can use content. I know there are distinctions online. Some content you do have permission to use in certain circumstances and others not. Um, so, in terms of the projects we're doing in this class, because we're basically keeping them inside this class, I think it doesn't really matter. However, if it is going to be something that you're maybe using quote unquote for real, or that you might be sharing out with other people, then it would be a good idea certainly to double check any media that you're pulling, to just make sure that you do have the rights to use that. But I do know that for educational purposes, there's a sort of a different set of guidelines that apply. I know for music, that, like, for instance, we are allowed to make Xeroxes of a piece of music if we are using it in an educational setting and we have the original in hand as well. Um, Yeah, yeah, and that's always a good thing to do as well, Sarah, is to give the proper citation for it if you have a question for it. So, but um, all right, yeah, good questions. All right, so just to kind of finish this up then for the evening, I'm going to return back to the Moodle, and oh, look at that, I've been away for so long that it logged me out. Um, so in terms of our homework, there are basically three things, but like I said, I'm removing one of them. I'm going to take the 4C analysis out of the works. So there's a forum. One of the things that we're going to focus on over the next few weeks are kind of the particular challenges and approaches to three different types of content or instruction. So we're going to be looking at instruction for facts, and then we're going to look at instruction for concepts, and then we're going to look at instruction for higher order thinking skills. So for next week, the forum, there's a prompt in the forum, but basically it's about considering, even in this day and age where there's so much focus on teaching concepts and teaching higher order thinking skills, there's obviously still a place for just teaching basic facts of something. So just to do a little reflection on that and maybe the challenges of that kind of instruction in the classroom. And maybe, facts maybe aren't always the most interesting thing. So how might you address that kind of, developing the interest in your students to just do that fact-based learning. So that's basically the topic for the forum is instruction for facts, and a couple of questions about that. The CCCC analysis, like I said, I'm going to take that one off the table for right now. I'll turn that into some kind of an online assignment through the Moodle that'll probably be part of next week's offline classroom. There is a graphic if you want to look at it on the Moodle that I prepared for tonight. That's just a quick grid of the 4Cs and a little bit of an idea of what they are, but we'll go into more detail in that down the road. So then in Powtoon, just as a mini project to kind of just put everything we covered this week into use, is to start from a blank Powtoon, and I just want you to create 3 slides slash scenes where each slide teaches a fact. So this is going to tie into the forum as well. So your thinking in the forum can maybe help to inform the way that you structure your 3 slides. Select subject matter that you're familiar with, that you might actually use in an educational setting. I know it says don't forget to keep the 4 C's in mind. Since we haven't covered those yet, don't worry too much about that. That's more about design concepts than instructional concepts. So it'll really just be the 2 things in preparation for next week is just to do the forum and then just spend a little time getting a little more comfortable with Powtoon, and creating 3 slides where each slide teaches a fact. The slides can last as long as you want them to, so whatever you think you need timeline wise to demonstrate the fact. We're using Powtoon for a reason, which is that it does allow you to, you know, cartoon eyes, to animate ideas and facts. So maybe try to incorporate that in as a way to make the fact more interesting or more approachable. See what you can do with that. Um, and then just, save the project when you're done. So it'll just be those two items. And then again, next week, I will not be online or on campus during this time slot. I will set it up so that if you, yeah, good question, Sarah. Since you guys are in my classroom, and actually, this is since I don't get to see what you see as a student, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I know a couple of you, the projects you worked on this past week. In fact, Sandy, did you do something particular with yours? Because I know yours, for instance, showed up in my classroom list. Did you? Was there an option to send it to the class, or did you just save it? Okay. Okay, yeah, and I forget there was at least one or two others who I did have things show up at my classroom. Oh, yes, sure. Okay, yeah, yeah, I do see that here. So was that just a matter of saving it, or at your end was there an option to save it to the class? Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Like I said, because I'm the instructor, I don't have the option of seeing what your interface looks like. So that's good to know that it's just a matter of going to the my Powtoons page and then assigning it that way. So, gotcha. Okay. Right. Yeah. You don't have to share something until you're ready to share it. So yeah, yeah. And in fact, I'm noticing right now, maybe just in the last few minutes, I am showing like new submissions from Tanya, from Sarah, and from Sandy. Um, so that's what you. So yeah, when you're. Oh, that's that's okay. So yeah, when you finish the project, just share it back to me that way. And if you have questions about that, maybe I'll try to figure out if I can sign myself up as a student as well through another account, and that way I can take a closer look at what you guys are looking at too. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, yeah, and just let me know because that would be good to know as well if that was something that was in that additional level of account. All right. Okay. All right. So unless there are any other questions for the greater good, like I said, I appreciate everybody's flexibility in terms of being willing to shift online. I think at least seeing the weather that flew through here, I think it was better for us not to be driving into campus tonight and so on. And like I said, next week I will not see you in person, so it is going to be another 2 weeks before we meet together. But we'll keep our fingers crossed that the weather is helpful next time around, and we'll go from there. So for next week, just follow up on the Moodle. Anything, well, like I said, there will still be there's this homework that will be due next week. There will be homework that will sort of start with next week's class and go through the following week. But what I will also post are a couple of activities that the idea is basically that you would be working on those activities and that they should take roughly the amount of time that attending the class would have taken. Um, and you could choose to do that during this time slot if you kind of have this time slot set aside for working on this class or attending the class. But obviously, you'll have the option of sort of completing that work outside as well. But we'll just replace the class with a couple of activities in the Moodle. All right, so I will stay online for a couple more minutes if anybody has anything else they need to follow up with me on. But other than that, I thank you all for being here tonight, and we'll see you. Yes, you can send me email if you have questions. You can contact me through Remind. There is, I think I pointed this out. Maybe it was at last night's class. At the bottom of each week's Moodle section, I do always leave an open forum for questions and concerns. So if something comes up that maybe you want to throw out to the class, you can also throw it in there. But yeah, email, Remind, through the Moodle, anything you need to do to get in touch with me, feel free to. All right, good night.